What's up, y'all? We are back with another edition of DNVR Rams Live. Stoked, I was able to catch up with Geoff Grammer of the Albuquerque Journal. Nobody better to set the scene for a massive matchup in the Mountain West between CSU and New Mexico. The Rams looking to avoid being swept by the Lobos, looking to keep pace in what is currently a tight race at the top of the league. This matchup has big time implications for the Mountain West Player of the Year race, and I picked Geoff's brain on that. Nique Clifford's case versus Donovan Dent. Both have been incredible. Both have genuinely looked like All-Americans at various points of this season, and I think either have a really strong case for the award. I picked his brain on the future of the Mountain West, the Pac-12. We kind of talked about why it makes sense from CSU side to leave, especially with Boise State and San Diego State, who had been trying to get out for a long time. But it is a little bit bittersweet, even from our perspective of, losing some of these great relationships we have, particularly on the Mountain West basketball side. I've been a huge Mountain West basketball supporter for 15 plus years at this point. I got really into it in high school. I was a big part of what made me want to go to CSU, was to be in Moby Madness, watching some of those matchups under Tim Miles and a lot of those great games against teams like New Mexico and San Diego State and UNLV and BYU back in the day before they left. I love this matchup. I have a ton of love for New Mexico hoops. Their fans, the support they get is tremendous. I've got a lot of love for Albuquerque as a whole. The food is tremendous. It's just a place I've always enjoyed going. I wish I was going this week, honestly. It's a ton to get into, so I'm not going to ramble too much. We're going to jump right into it here, and I appreciate Geoff Grammer so much for giving us some of his time. And we're going to set the scene for a big-time matchup between the Rams and the Lobos. All right, guys, I am thrilled to have a special guest on today's show. We've got Geoff Grammer of the Albuquerque Journal, one of the most respected basketball sources around the Mountain West, certainly someone that I look up to and try and follow in terms of how I mold my coverage. Geoff, thank you for coming on. We appreciate you. There's nobody better to set the scene for a massive CSU New Mexico game. First things first, though, how you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm glad to be on. I think you got to set the bar a lot higher than if you're giving me all that kind of praise there. But I appreciate it nonetheless. And yeah, man, it's basketball season. It's every day something new. It's fun.
I just think you do a great job of being really insightful, bringing a lot of passion, both for the sport and for your region. I just think it's cool the way you show so much love for really the entire state. Like I know that's kind of a debate amongst your audience. Like, are you a New Mexico guy? Are you a New Mexico State guy?
Yeah.
But you do a great job. So
I am a born and raised New Mexican. So everywhere has a little bit of the excitement when you see something on TV or whatever, but the old Leonardo DiCaprio meme where he's pointing, anytime like a true New Mexican has a chance to sort of brag on New Mexico, it will. Now, we'll also fight with each other all the time and we'll self-loathe and we kind of have like this weird sort of prideful shame about a lot of us, a lot of our stuff. And it's a weird mix, but I am born and raised New Mexican, so I definitely have I love bragging on the whole state, and I also understand how much infighting we have too, though.
I'll say this: if we were power ranking Mountain West trips based on best food, Albuquerque might be the top spot.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, man, it really. There's I didn't come by all this without the reality of some New Mexican food being a big part of it. I can tell you that.
I don't blame you, my man. You look good though, so don't worry about it. Let's get into it. Obviously, we've got a massive matchup coming up on Wednesday night. New Mexico coming off of a really dominant performance against Utah State. Now have double-digit wins over San Diego State, Utah State, Boise State too, I believe.
Yep.
What is clicking with this team right now? Because it seems like at times they maybe play to their competition. You have some weird blips with the home loss to New Mexico State. I know weird stuff happens in rivalries, but losing at San Jose State. But man, like when this team is clicking, they are dangerous.
I'll start with the San Jose State loss at San Jose State. I was there, watched the game obviously. I think they just lost that game. Like I don't think that was they weren't ready. I know the environment played into it a little bit, but I really just think San Jose State played a really good game. And while New Mexico should win that game, obviously they should win that game. That wasn't sort of a they weren't ready or something else was going on kind of loss. It was just I think San Jose State played a really good game, and frankly they've showed that
They're
against
frisky.
most
Yeah.
teams. Yeah, I mean Colorado State took care of them obviously nice and easy, but they were in a one possession game in the final minute against Utah State, against Boise State, against Nevada too, I think. So they've been doing that all year, and then they finally got their win against a really good team in the New Mexico game. I I don't want to write it off. The Lobos can't lose a game like that if they're trying to build an at-large resume. I get that. But I really look at that game like when I look back at this whole season, I'm not going to look at that game as a man, what was going on that week. Now, December 4th and December 7th, they almost lost to San Jose State in the pit 3 days before they did lose to New Mexico State in the pit in overtime. And that was a bad week. That was the week that lawsuit story came out.
Mm.
A walk-on the team announced he was basically going to sue the team because he says a teammate punched him on a charter flight. Um, None of that's resolved yet, but I'll just say this as far as an update goes, out of both like journalistic fairness and appropriateness, but also because I've talked to a lot of people and there were a lot of witnesses on that plane. There were a lot of people around the happenings that day. And there is a reason that the school to date has not found any disciplinary action and there is no criminal charge. And I don't want to dismiss it as nothing happened, but I will say it certainly looks like from everybody I've spoken with, including people who were there on that flight, that maybe this was something maybe blown out of proportion. Teammates get in fights sometimes, and it happens. And I don't know if that rises to the level of needing a lawsuit. But maybe it does. Maybe that's all this was, and maybe there was more to it. But that was the one week that I would say out of the entire season, the Lobos looked distracted, and I can only point to that. I don't know if that's exactly what it was, but I can point to that. On the Monday of that week, basically it came out that a teammate of theirs who's still on the roster, by the way, his name is still on the roster. They haven't kicked anybody off, but a walk-on accused a teammate of punching him and kind of said some things about the coaches never checked in on him or anything like that. Some of that's true because none of them knew he had a broken nose or anything like that. He never told them. He would not let them check him out. Everybody that saw what happened didn't think it was that bad because they all saw it. So anyway, that's all to say. I think since that game, the Lobos have actually been really, really good and really, really focused. And that includes the game at Colorado State, frankly. I think it was about then that they were sort of turning things around. When they lost that New Mexico State game, they sort of came to a realization like, man, like we can be pretty good, but we can't do that. Last year,
Yeah.
they wouldn't have been in the NCAA tournament um, had they not won the Mountain West tournament. And they were shocked by that because they had a 22 net and all that kind of stuff. But if you look at any one game last year, well, they lost to Air Force at home. So they know that like one game can cost you an awful lot. And I think the New Mexico State loss sort of made them realize that. And they've been really, really good since then, even with that San Jose State loss in the mix.
When I think of New Mexico, I this group in particular, what stands out to me is the athleticism, the pace. Like it just feels like
Yeah.
they can bury teams in a hurry, and we've seen them do that against some elite competition. Obviously, some very highly talented players. What would you say is New Mexico's biggest strength as a team
Yeah,
right now? Like,
I'm gonna pull something up that kind of speaks to that I just wrote over the weekend, and it's a note, kind of a continuing note that I keep repeating. Um, but they have an ability, what you just said to, they played a pace and they have an athleticism to them. Um, they play at a like kind of a breakneck pace, but they don't play reckless very often. They don't turn the
Yeah.
ball over very much. They're able to execute. But listen to these that they've had. This is just in Mountain West play. They've had not just 10-0 runs that, Evan Maya, if you look at his site, he has the kill shot stat, which I love, by the way. 10-0 runs. But these are six now runs that they've had in Mountain West games. 22-8 to close out San Jose State on December 4th. And they were trailing the Spartans that whole game, but closed on a 22-8 run. Okay, 22-8, kind of modest. But then they go to Colorado State on the road, 21-0 in the first half. At Wyoming, after a historically bad first half where they started 1 for 16 shooting, they opened the second half on a 17-1 run. They didn't give up a field goal for like the first 8 minutes of that second half or something like that. They go against Boise State and close the first half on a 23-2 run that Leon and Boise State they just look like, oh my God, what's happening here? How do we stop it? The only thing that ended up stopping that was the halftime. It would have been worse had halftime not come. Against Fresno State, they opened 16-0 and 25-4. So it was 25-4 at one point. And then against Utah State the other night, they were trailing 48-39 with 15 minutes to go, and they closed the game out 45-13 at the Spectrum. A 45-13 run against Utah State
In
in the
Logan,
Spectrum
yeah.
is in 15 minutes of time. That was about as impressive. Well, let me back up. I don't even know if I want to say it's that impressive because it almost snuck up on me. I didn't realize it was that bad. But next thing you know, they're up 8, and you're like, wow, and they're up 12, and then it expands to about 20-point lead, and I'm like, geez, man, what's going on here? And when's Utah State gonna break out of this, shake whatever's going on? And they just never did. So the Lobos do have this ability to overwhelm teams in spurts, like about 4 or 5 minutes at a time. But it's not just those 10-0 runs that you can recover from. A lot of them are, look, Colorado State played pretty well other than that 21-0 run, right?
Yeah, it's not
When they played
awful.
in Moby. But the 21-0 run, you can't just erase. So if you can avoid that with the Lobos, if you can have a player, I'll say this about the Colorado State game. Nique Clifford's a guy who should be able to get his own shot and stop a run like that. And in that game, he didn't. I think he has in pretty much every other game because his stats are unreal. And he is a Mountain West Player of the Year candidate because of it. You need somebody to sort of stop the Lobos somehow when they're in those runs. And so far, nobody's really been able to do it in Mountain West play.
I want to come back to the Mountain West Player of the Year debate in a second because I
Yeah.
think Clifford and Dent are probably the leading two front runners, at least in my opinion, as of right now. What would you say, like, let's say Colorado State were to win this game,
Mm.
what would that look like to you? Like, where is New Mexico maybe susceptible? What is CSU's path to victory, especially in the pit?
Yeah, I mean, I think Nique would have to be a big part of it. I think that the Lobos aren't very, I don't want to say they aren't very good. If they have a weakness right now over the past month or 6 weeks, I would say it's their half court offense. And kind of weird to say that when they have a guy as a point guard who's playing so well. And Colorado State knows that, as well as anybody with what Isaiah Stevens was able to do for 5 years. It's hard to say the half court offense when you have a point guard setting everything up is their weakness, but I think that is their weakness right now. They're so good in transition. They're so good at scoring off block shots, rebounds, steals, of course, live ball turnovers, all that kind of stuff. If they can get running, they're really good lately. So I would say if you can keep them from that transition game, and Colorado State is a team that doesn't go for offensive rebounds a whole lot, and with the intent of getting back on defense and stopping teams from getting out and running. If Colorado State's successful at that and makes them play a half court game, I think the Lobos offense certainly isn't nearly as effective. I do think they're susceptible. It hasn't bit them quite too much yet, but they're susceptible to foul trouble. I think they're pretty thin inside. If Nelly Jr. Joseph gets in foul trouble, their backup center, their backup five anyway, is Atiki who transferred from BYU, who hasn't been very good beyond about 90 seconds at a time or 2 minutes, and then he really sort of slows down his progress, I'll say. So he's good in short spurts, but if you can get the big man in trouble and they got to start playing like Mustafa Amzil or their backup big man Jovan Milicevic, If you have to start playing those guys at the 5, I think the Lobos can have some problems.
I think transition is definitely going to be one of the biggest keys in this
Yeah.
game. CSU is interesting because they're tied for dead last in steals. They are dead last in blocks, but they're second in the Mountain West in scoring defense and league play. They've got, I believe, the second best field goal percentage of allowed. Like it's not super flashy. It's not super exciting necessarily on either side of the ball, but they, in league play at least, obviously had a lot of struggles in November and December, have been pretty fundamentally sound. And I am interested to see if they can make this a half court game. I assume they would want to slow it down,
Yeah.
limit how many possessions New Mexico has. It'll be interesting. And then I'm definitely interested in foul trouble because CSU is the best free throw shooting team in the league. So like that
Well,
could be a path to victory for sure. Then I like what you're
okay, so
selling
you want
here.
to talk free throw shooting being a strength for Colorado State. Just remember this. I'm pulling it up to see the exact stat. New Mexico's free throw defense right now, number 2 in the country. Opposing teams are only shooting 64% against the Lobos at the free throw line. Obviously, there's no free throw defense, but for whatever reason, teams do not hit free throws against the Lobos. And it's been, to their benefit, obviously, if teams aren't going to hit free throws. But for some reason, they've had 2 teams shoot under 50% in a game against them. They've had teams, Ian Martinez, who knows what's going on with him because he started it in the UNLV game, but he was shooting 90.9% going into the UNLV game last Wednesday. He missed 3 against UNLV. He missed like the front end of 1-on-1s, and he missed 4 total, I think, against the Lobos. He missed more last week than he had all season. So there's something the Lobos do, I guess, against free throws that's really helping them out. So
Is it Snake? Is it voodoo
it might
magic?
be Snake. It could be Snake. I'll say I don't know if Snake's the reason, but I'll bet you he's. I'm not saying he's not.
I love him, man. He might be I'm a Denver Broncos fan, and so they had Barrel Man, like the signature fan. I love somebody that's that significant, that stands out that much, and is that diehard,
Yeah,
is that committed.
he's a character. He's college basketball, man. Little things like that.
CSU shows him respect. Nico Medved talks about it, like literally,
Nico,
like they give him a bunch of love when they come in. We're not trying to start
absolutely.
any bad juju. Like
He's popular among these coaches now. These first year coaches that don't know
they
him,
don't know how to handle it.
they still don't know what to do with it, right? But Leon Rice at Boise State got him a job once from a Boise State alum here in Albuquerque. Owns a
That's
restaurant.
awesome.
Got Snake a job once. Max Rice gave him shoes last year. I know Dave Pilipovich, who's on staff now at UNM, just had so many good stories to talk about with Snake when he got here. And the funniest one is Dave Pilipovich took over at Air Force in the middle of the season, right? And they'd fired an in-season firing when Pilipovich took over. And I don't know if it was the very next game. I think it might have been. It was before I was covering them for the Journal. But the very next game or shortly thereafter, Air Force comes to Albuquerque, comes to the pit. And when they pull up, Snake is on the ground, on the pavement, looking under the bus, just like kind of perplexed. And Air Force guys didn't know what to think about it. And finally, Dave walks up to him and says, Snake, what's going on, man? What are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm just looking for the coach you guys just threw under the bus in the middle of the season. So Snake follows the league. He knows quite a bit about the Mountain West, and he is a good fan.
All right, we are going to get right back to that conversation with Geoff. We've got about another 20 minutes on that interview, so do not go anywhere. We get into Nique Clifford versus Donovan Dent for the Mountain West Player of the Year race. We get into conference realignment, the bittersweet element of it, whether you're excited or not. We talk about all kinds of fun stuff. Great interview with Geoff. You guys aren't going to want to miss anything. If you got any questions, comments like that, keep them coming in the Toyota chat. I will get to them after we finish that interview with Geoff Grammer. I'll also re-hit on some more keys for CSU against New Mexico. We've got a great question there from Juan in the Toyota chat. Again, we'll come back to that. Real quick, we've got to pay the bills. We've got to shout out a couple of our partners. And we're going to start with Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets even easier. What's awesome about Game Time, and specifically this new Game Time Picks feature, it's an awesome curation function that just makes the process that much easier. Game Time already had the best deals in town, but they have such an insane assortment of tickets to offer. It can be a little bit overwhelming to sort through at times, especially if they've got thousands and thousands of tickets. With Game Time Picks, you're getting the best of the best in terms of bang for your buck. They're just constantly trying to get you the best value possible. What's great about Game Time, they've got tickets for sports, they've got tickets for theater, for comedy, you name it, they've got it. Obviously, we've got baseball coming up. We've got the NBA and NHL heating up as we get towards the playoffs. If you're going to go to a game, make sure you check out our friends at Game Time, and specifically make sure you check out that Game Time Picks feature. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use that code DNVR for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, create an account, redeem that code DNVR for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. I also want to talk to you guys about Toyota, the official vehicle of DNVR and a proud partner of CSU Athletics. Trucks have always been a part of Toyota's DNA for generations. Toyota has built durable legends destined for greatness and perfect for Colorado. Whether you're conquering off-road trails or hauling the weight of the world, there's a Toyota truck that's just right for you, like the all-new 2024 Tacoma or the Land Cruiser. Toyota has 17 models with available all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, like the Epic 4Runner. They also have more low and zero-emission vehicles combined than any other automaker to give customers numerous choices to reduce their carbon footprint. 16 hybrid vehicles to choose from, like the Tundra iForce Max hybrid truck. Not to be outdone, Toyota SUVs take command on the road and on the trail, so you can explore the road less traveled without having to sacrifice smooth city rides in SUVs like the RAV4 and Grand Highlander. Toyota is a proud partner of CSU Athletics and the official vehicle of DNVR. Toyota, let's go places. All right, let's get right back to that interview with Geoff. We're not going to mess around too much. He's got a ton to say, and you want to hear it. So here's part 2 of that interview with Geoff Grammer of the Albuquerque Journal. I would assume that Snake would make a pretty good case for Donovan Dent as the Mountain West Player of the Year, and I can make a pretty good case for him myself. I mean, he's great scorer, top 5 in assists, as is Nique Clifford. Both of those guys are having awesome numbers. I've made the argument that given that CSU was projected 7th in the league, that you could maybe say Nique Clifford has elevated CSU in a way that's greater than anticipated or expected, whereas Donovan Dent is kind of doing exactly what you would have anticipated. I mean, I was calling him New Mexico's best player last year when a lot of the focus was on JT Toppin and Jalen House.
Yeah, a lot of people thought last year. In fact, Jalen was leaving out, he exhausted his eligibility, but Jamal Mashburn Jr. being a ball dominant guard too, had he come back, I don't know if Donovan would have. I think it worked out well where everybody maybe saw what was going to happen this offseason, and Jamal Mashburn Jr. wanted to probably get out and do one last year kind of on his own away from Patino, who he had been with for 4 years. So it didn't get into any kind of conflict where a decision was going to have to be made. But I don't think Donovan Dent would be what he is this year as a ball dominant point guard with Jamal Mashburn on the team. Now, Mash is doing great. He's out at Temple now, averaging over 20 points a game. He's having a great year. It wasn't a bad breakup by any means, but I don't think it would have worked out had Jamal Mashburn Jr. stayed here.
Is Dent the player of the year in your estimation, given New Mexico where they're at in the standings?
Yeah, I would. I would say so. I think I think what gets overlooked with him a little bit is he's also in league play. He's top 10 in blocks. He's top 10 in steals. Leads the league in points and in a second in assists. He's doing a lot of things even beyond just the scoring. In some weird way, I told somebody this morning. I think maybe his worst game in some ways, like the only game I've seen somebody really take him out of what he wants to do first, which is kind of be the floor general and pass. The only team that I've really seen take that away was UNLV 2 weeks ago, or just last weekend. And what's funny about that is he only had a couple of assists, so they took that away from him. And so he just scored 34 points on them instead.
I was going to say only dropped 40 almost.
Yeah, so he was unstoppable in that second half. They did take away what he wanted to do, though. And I think that's really the only time I've seen a team really successfully take him out of what he wants to do. He's so comfortable and confident on the floor. It's not just that he's doing his thing offensively. He's really like Isaiah did, like Stevens did last year. Like he really made some players look better than they probably are, because he does find them in the right place. He does find them when they need it. And I just think that he's in one of those grooves this season where I think he is the player of the year. But it's certainly not a done deal. I mean, there's still so much basketball left to play, and he's not so far away from anybody that I think Nique, even though Tyson Degenhart, if Boise State gets rolling, can still be in the conversation. I'm not as high on Miles Byrd as every single San Diego State fan obviously is, but Miles Byrd can be in that conversation as well. So I think right now, if I had to say who's going to be player of the year, I would probably say Dent one, Nique two, Tyson Degenhart three would probably be my voting. Utah State, I just don't see them as having the one alpha as I they had two really good players for a while, and then both of them have sort of come down to from really good to just good. Ian Martinez and Mason Falslev. I don't think either one of them right now is playing at a player of the year level. Obviously, they're still a really good team, but I really think it's kind of a three-man race right now, and still some room, some time for a Nick Boyd, who I really liked for a while at San Diego State, and a Miles Byrd to get back in the conversation. And there's somebody on. Oh, I suppose Dedon Thomas you could throw in there, but I'm not as high on him as some people are. But who am I forgetting? There's one player out there that I think I'm forgetting, but
I mean, Ag Beam at Wyoming's top five in
sure,
scoring, but
sure,
like I think team success does historically dictate into, who wins this award.
yeah, yeah.
I'm with you. If I had to forecast the front runner, I would say it's Dent as of now. I think Nique has a better case than he's maybe being given by a lot of people nationally, but it's
Well,
going to be a fun
myself
race.
included, I was giving when I updated people for like the first three weeks of the season or so. I kept updating like just little posts on social media like the net rankings and here's where everybody is in Ken Palm, and I was just showing like the top five teams, and I would call them the top five, and I wasn't even including Colorado State in that until about a week or two ago when I realized, well, damn, like why wouldn't you? You're halfway through the season at this point. They are in a control their own destiny sort of scenario. Oh, well, they were. Now they're well, like, no, they still are because
I mean,
they're
if they
two.
win out,
Yeah,
they got at least a share
yeah,
of
they
the
can get a
title.
share at least if they win out. So yeah, Colorado State should have been probably maybe included in the San Diego State, New Mexico, Utah State kind of, and Boise State. I think it was those four that I was reporting stats on pretty much all season. I finally had to give up on Nevada, even though I still can't figure out why they're as bad as they are.
Me either.
Um,
They've got the talent.
yeah, they got talent. Um, I don't know if they have. I think they expected Kobe Sanders to maybe be a better point guard than he is. I think they've been better when Daniel Foster's done a lot more running their point. But they're still going to knock somebody off and kind of remind everybody how talented they are. But then they're probably still going to pick up another loss to a bottom half team that makes everyone realize this just isn't their year.
I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you got to get going here in a couple minutes, but I did want to pick your brain just briefly on kind of the rest of the league as well as
Yep.
the future of the Mountain West, which is obviously a big point of discussion.
I
You
will say
know,
I want to say thank you for even having me on. I am from covering a school that wasn't invited to come along, so I want to thank you for including me, the low hanging fruit beat writer on the podcast.
nobody is more disappointed to lose New Mexico basketball and all this than me. Look, I think you can make a logical argument as to why the teams that were picked were when you look at like finances and all that. I'm not going to get into all the politics of it. 8
Sure.
million people have made these arguments. Everybody knows where they stand. But I do, especially on the basketball side, think the Mountain West has something that's unique and special. And it is going to bum me out to lose New Mexico and I think they'll still play in non-conference CSU and New
Yeah.
Mexico specifically, but um it's going to be weird. And even like Nevada, and we'll see what happens with UNLV, obviously. But what is the general feeling with New Mexico fans right now? Because I know, especially initially, people were pissed. The Mountain West has backfilled. All things considered, done a pretty good job of keeping this league together, considering the position that
Sure.
the schools that were left behind were put in. But just what's the feeling right now, and where do you feel like all this goes? I personally don't feel like a merger is possible, especially now that the Mountain West has backfilled. I know some people are still floating that as a
Yeah.
hypothetical, but where does this all go in your
Yeah, I
estimation?
would say as far as the merger, just to clear that, conversation piece, I would say I would have said zero chance on the merger a week or two ago, and then it's at least still alive now in my mind. But yeah, what do you do with, they've added a UTEP, a Grand Canyon, in Northern Illinois in football only. If a merger at this point requires everybody that has been added, then those schools have to agree to it, first of all. But my big thing is this, like I hate that a really good, really fun basketball league is being broken up. Now, it's going to be a fine basketball league on the Pac-12 side. The Mountain West still isn't going to be an awful league, but it's just not what it is right now. And I wish that had cooler heads prevailed in the build-up to what made the schools decide to do this. They were already discussing putting spending minimums on Mountain West schools. And I think there were people dragging their feet with that around the league for obvious reasons. It was schools that probably didn't want to spend more money and couldn't spend more money and couldn't meet certain benchmarks. But the discussions had already started and they were probably heading that way. And the schools that ended up leaving and joining the Pac-12, I think saw the tea leaves or read the tea leaves and saw that that probably wasn't ever going to happen as long as the teams, as long as the schools who didn't have the money were still voting members, they weren't going to make that happen. So I think that I just wish it could have happened where there was a merger from the start rather than a split up, and you put those spending parameters in place. But I'll like actually enforce them too, though. Don't make them have don't say a school has to spend this much on football or has to meet these benchmarks and then give them a 5-year probationary period. Like this has to be a 2-year cycle. If you don't do it in these 2 years, you're gone in year 3 or something like that. And I wish that could have happened. It didn't. Lobo fans are really upset, and there are some who don't understand why their basketball product wasn't enough. And those fans
I think
are,
that's a valid argument, to be honest with you,
well,
because basketball is a point of emphasis for the Pac-12 in all this.
and there's two really good arguments for New Mexico in my mind. Basketball and everything that comes with it, the pit, the tradition, not necessarily in the postseason, but certainly a great regular season tradition. Um, but the other thing that I think is interesting is NIL. And if you're looking at the next 5 to 10 years of college athletics and who's going to be most successful, I get rev share is about to come here, but right now New Mexico's killing it in NIL right now. And there's a guy, Kurt Roth, who is an alum. He was a Brooklyn real estate attorney who basically is retired here in Albuquerque, who's running the NIL, and they're doing really good in NIL. And if you want to tell me who the healthiest programs in the Mountain West right now are, I'm probably going to actually look at NIL because it speaks to a bigger thing. It speaks to a school can get so much funding from the state, from its school, all that kind of stuff. But what can you do beyond that from the fan base? If your fan base is stepping up to spend money on NIL, and in this case at New Mexico, the guy running it is backing it himself, but now getting a ton of people to start paying for it and pitch in as well. Like I think that speaks volumes for the potential health, or not potential, but for the health of a program. And UNM's NIL is doing really good right now, and it's now starting to reach over into the football ranks, and we'll see what that means. I mean, they had a one good year. For New Mexico, they had one good year and it ended up being a 5-win season that didn't even get to a bowl game. But there was so much excitement around Bronco that when he left for Utah State, it was kind of a gut punch. I thought I thought it was going to last longer, but I'll tell you what, man, like there's an excitement about Jason Eck and the new football coach now. Even coming up from the FCS ranks, which isn't usually the exciting kind of hire, there's an excitement about football that's unique for these parts for a program that's been bad for a long time. And between that and the NIL success, I just think New Mexico could be in a better place in a couple years. I don't know if that's going to be the case now with the conferences splitting up, but I think New Mexico could be in a pretty good place in the next couple years.
I'll say this. I've been pretty consistent in terms of my thoughts on all this. Of From CSU's standpoint, you can't afford to get left behind given what they're spending.
100%.
Like with what Boise and San Diego State have been trying to leave since they went to the Big East 15 years ago.
That's right.
The writing has been on the wall with that for a long time. Now, I'm a Mountain West guy. I love the Mountain West tournament. I cover the league in football and basketball. Like I'm into this, and it bums me out to think of like the potential negative impact of this for programs like New Mexico, even Wyoming. I know that's like the border war. It's a great
Yep.
rivalry, but I love the history and I love the tradition and I love that they're going to keep playing. But there's a part of me, especially, that while I do support this decision based on essentially CSU doing what's best for them given the options available, like if they end up adding Texas State, for instance, I would
Right.
have just have rather had New Mexico at that point. Give me the pit. Texas State doesn't do anything for me. And it feels like we're kind of inching towards territory.
I, I do think that I'll tell you, any Lobo fan or anybody at UNM that says otherwise is lying, in my opinion. They would have been in the group if they could have been. I know it's nice to say, the Mountain West is all staying together and we're all, a happy family now. I think just about anybody that could have gone would have gone in that situation, and that includes UNM. But they just really didn't put themselves in a good position for years with their football program, and that's where we're at now. And New Mexico has so much money in oil reserves right now. People don't realize this, but southern and southeast really, New Mexico is right next to Texas, where all the oil money is. There's a lot of that in New Mexico as well, and there's just billions of dollars in state money right now. The problem is everything in the state is asking for it. Every program, every school, higher ed, not just for athletics, but for everything, roads, education. We have a lot of lists that New Mexico should, try and work on climbing out of the bottom of. And athletics, while fans think it should be a priority, is really just one of about 50 entities that's trying to get some of this billions of dollars of oil money. But if they get just a little bit of it, I really think they're in a position where, like I said, I think in the next couple of years, New Mexico could be in a pretty good place.
Is there any world in which you get new football facilities in the next decade? Because I think that would be
Yeah,
night and day.
yeah, I think so. I think New Mexico, New Mexico State. It's a two FBS program or state, right? Two FBS school state, and both of them, Aggie Memorial Stadium down in Las Cruces and University Stadium in Albuquerque, were built within the same decade. The Pitt and the Pan American Center were built within the same decade in the 60s. This state has always sort of been a let's help both of them out at the same time kind of thing. And I think instead of they've been fighting each other for so long, and New Mexico had some financial turmoil for a long time over the past decade. I covered a bunch of it, and I think New Mexico State turned that into look what we do with less. And anytime money came up for UNM, they said, "Oh, they're doing something wrong. They're doing something wrong." If New Mexico State could quit doing that, and I'm an Aggie, but if New Mexico State and Aggie fans could quit doing so much, like always pointing out, let's not trust UNM and what they're doing with all the money. If they got on the same page, I think they can convince lawmakers to help both schools out right now because there is the money, there is the opportunity, and I think both schools need both the either upgrades of their basketball facilities or nobody wants a new pit or to get rid of the pit, but like there needs to be another option here. They'll never host an NCAA tournament game again here in Albuquerque, not at the pit, not when you can't get down to courtside without wheeling down, just dropping a wheelchair down there. There's ADA accessibility issues, there's Wi-Fi issues, a lot of issues. So Albuquerque could use like an indoor arena, but for the two universities, they could use upgrades and facilities at their football stadiums more than anybody knows. And I think this Pac-12 Mountain West situation of the past year made a lot of lawmakers realize, oh, it's just not them asking for money. It's everybody else moving on without us now. And so I think New Mexico and some of the lawmakers are now finally on board with we better do something to help our universities.
The last thing I wanted to ask you, and this can just be your opinion. I'm not sure if you have anything sourced on this, but why didn't the Mountain West backfill with New Mexico State? Like, why not make that a conference game?
Yeah, two things. One, not really two things. One thing, I would tell you that there was a conversation had, and New Mexico State fans aren't huge, don't like hearing this. New Mexico State did not have a school president in place or a chancellor or anybody who could actually make the decision on the money. But more than that, I think it was clear New Mexico State didn't have the money. Now, UTEP was in a similar financial situation, but Heather Wilson, their president, who used to be a state representative from New Mexico and um, big Air Force credentials in her past, the UTEP president herself got on the phone and was sitting in the conversations with Gloria in the Mountain West and committed X millions of dollars toward football over the next 2 years, towards facilities or whatever they need to do to get to where the Mountain West said, if you want to join us, we need you to at least do this because we can't just add teams that aren't going to help us in any way. We'd like to add schools that are at least going to meet a minimum standard because this is what got them into the mess, right? Is some schools that weren't meeting what
The San Jose
Colorado
States of the
State,
world.
right? The San Jose States of the world, what Boise, San Diego State, Colorado State, the minimum investments they're making is why they left because nobody else was doing it. So the Mountain West wanted to make sure whoever's coming in was meeting some of those minimal financial standards, and UTEP promised it directly from Heather Wilson, the president. New Mexico State not only couldn't commit to that, they didn't actually have a person in place, a president in place who would have that conversation. So there was a conversation that the Mountain West had with New Mexico State, and it was essentially one of there's not a decision to be made because there's not even a person to make the decision right now. So let's just move on. And that was the decision. It wasn't that they didn't want New Mexico State. It's that it was a non-starter because nobody at New Mexico State was willing to really step up and make the decision.
That's kind of heartbreaking.
Yeah. You're telling me because it makes sense, right? It does make sense. I mean, if New Mexico State can invest just a little more, and if that money's coming from the state, that sure would help. But if New Mexico State could invest just a little bit more, they'd probably be in the Mountain West right now.
Well, I would have loved to have seen it. I loved I don't know if it'll continue, but I like that they played the home and home in basketball. I know there's been some fights in football and like there's been a lot of drama, but I think it would have been cool to add them. I guess maybe down the line, who knows? This conference realignment, the shuffling never ends. It wouldn't surprise me if we're all back in the same league 10 years from now anyways, even if we don't
ruins so much of good things and all the other sports, and I love football, but man, football drove the bus on ruining some good basketball leagues in my mind.
I'm with you, man. It's gonna be bittersweet. I'm gonna miss, like, I'm excited as a CSU alum, but especially on the hoop side, like, it just Mountain West basketball delivers every year. I've been locked in for 15 years. Moby Madness when I was in high school was like what convinced me of, oh yeah, dude, I want to be a part of this. Like, I want to be at all these games. And it makes me sad, but I love talking about all this with you, man. I have so much respect for everything that you do. We'd love to have you on the show again down the line. Tell the people, do you have anything else, you want to promote in terms of they can follow you on Twitter, all that fun stuff?
abqjournal.com. Follow me on social media at Geoff Grammer. I spell them both wrong. It's Geoff for Jeff, and Grammer with an ER at the end, Grammer. And or you could just look up the hashtag fire Grammer, and you could probably find find some threads to me there. So I have a lot of people wanting me fired. It is a joke at this point. At least I hope it is. I think it is because I'm playing along with it. But I certainly interact quite a bit on social media, so you can find me there.
Come for the basketball coverage, stay for the La Bamba tweets. Geoff Grammer, man of the people, does an awesome job. Make sure you guys follow him. He'll have all kinds of great coverage of that CSU New Mexico matchup. Huge shout out to Geoff Grammer. Please make sure that you are following him, supporting his work. I've been reading his coverage for a decade now. I would argue that nobody does it better. Just gives great detail, great insight. I love his emptying the notebook feature, especially. It's awesome. I'm going to double down on some things that Geoff and I talked about, give out some keys for CSU against New Mexico in this matchup on Wednesday night. Real quick, though, do want to shout out a couple of more partners. Always got to make sure we keep this show rolling. And we are going to start with some great friends of ours, and that is Coors Light, who encourage you to choose a chill mindset. Life can be a lot when you're juggling the stress of work, of personal relationships. I mean, everybody goes through it. Everybody has those days where it just feels like the weight of the world is bringing you down. You feels like you've got 10 million things to juggle and only two hands to try and deal with it. It can be chaotic. It can be a lot. It can make you a not very fun guy to be around. And Coors Light encourages you to rise above it, to choose a chill mindset, and always keep in mind that essentially the sun will come up tomorrow. Like sometimes things get screwed up and you end up having more fun in the end than what you anticipated. You were supposed to have a barbecue, gets rained out. Instead, maybe you end up having a couple of garage beers, listening to some classic tunes. Life is what you make of it. And Coors Light encourages you to choose chill. When the mountains turn blue, cold as the Rockies, Coors Light is cold lagered, cold filtered, and cold packaged for a smooth finish. Choose chill this winter, then reach for a Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door by visiting CoorsLight.com/DNVR, or you can find it pretty much anywhere that sells beer. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. If you haven't heard, DNVR is also available live on TV. You guys are listening on YouTube right now live, or maybe you're listening later on via Spotify, Apple, etc. If you want to watch live on TV, you have that option. We're on Samsung TV Plus, channel 2348. You can find us on Xfinity, channel 4072. On Xumo Play, all you got to do is search DNVR or say it if you have a mic function on your remote control. If you do happen to check us out on your TV, which we recommend, snap a picture, send it to inthewild@thednvr.com. That's inthewild, all one word, at thednvr.com. We'll be featuring submissions live on the show and picking lucky winners for some free DNVR swag. Do not miss out. Really, really cool. A lot of things happening. Really appreciate Geoff for giving us some time this week. I did not give him a lot of notice on that, and he was able to make it happen for me, which I always appreciate. I appreciate everybody that's been rocking with us in the Toyota chat. You guys are awesome. I know we've got some questions here that we'll get to at the end. If you have any more questions, comments, anything, fire them our way. I'll get to as many as I can. I'll also give a couple of thoughts on the altitude situation. Sounds like Altitude and Comcast, after almost 6 years, have come to some type of resolution. It's not a perfect solution in my opinion, but I'll talk about that at the end. As far as the keys for CSU versus New Mexico, if you got into this interview late, or if you just want to kind of re-emphasize on some of the things that Geoff mentioned, I think he's right on. Basically everything that I had in my notes. The biggest key that I would say for CSU against this New Mexico team is you have to dictate the tempo. They want to get out and run on you. They want to make this, a fast pace, as many possessions as possible. And if you're CSU, I think you're trying to do the opposite. I think you're trying to make this largely a half court game. Yes, are there going to be spots where you can potentially push the pace yourself, try and get a transition bucket? You're not going to try and give up quality looks just for the sake of slowing things down. But the more that this is a track meet, the more that it favors New Mexico and their athleticism. And especially when the pace picks up, that tends to be when they get hot and they're able to bury teams. Geoff mentioned the kill shot, which is a great stat that Evan Maya tracks, one of the best in the biz. That's runs of 10-0 or more. And New Mexico has basically done that in every big Mountain West win. In the 76-68 win they had over CSU back in December, same day as the Arizona Bowl. So that game got slightly overlooked. A lot of people were out in Tucson. New Mexico had a 21-0 run in that first half. And it's really the difference in the game. Like, you look at the stats in that matchup, CSU 45% from the field versus 49 from New Mexico. Not a massive disparity there. New Mexico did make 4 more field goals, but it was the turnovers. CSU had 17 turnovers, which led to 16 points the other way. That was a big factor in that 21-0 run. Really, you take that apart, it's probably a 1 or a 2 possession game. You can't have that happen, because when New Mexico gets rolling, it gets away from you in a hurry. And we've seen it. I mean, we saw it. It was a tight game against Utah State this past weekend in Logan. And then you look up, all of a sudden they're up 15. It happens in a hurry, and especially in the pit. Like, you've got to be able to limit those dangerous runs, the kill shot runs of 10-0 or more. If that happens, it's not going to be your night, very likely. You got to hit your open shots, especially the stars. CSU as a team did not shoot the 3-ball well in that game against New Mexico, only 6 of 23 from the floor. Worse than the team numbers, though, was that Nique, Clifford, and Jalen Lake combined to go 1 of 12 from 3-point in that game. You got to hit your open shots in this game. New Mexico is just so potent offensively. You go 2, 3, 4+ minutes without a bucket, you're probably going to be down double digits pretty quickly. Like, you have to be able to make the most of it, and you need your stars to shine. Nique, Clifford versus Donovan, Dent, a lot of people would say those are the top 2 candidates for the Mountain West Player of the Year. I think you can throw Degenhart in the conversation as well, but I would say these are the 2 leading candidates. If you're Nique, if you want to elevate your case, this is where your star has to shine brightest. You are in a hostile setting, as hostile as it gets, against a team that has looked like they're the best in the league. Can you go into his building, outplay him, and elevate your team? If you do so, it's really going to just greatly help his cause with that Mountain West Player of the Year race and kind of getting validation with the whole debate. Outside of Nique, though, you need Jalen Lake to be a lot better than he was in that New Mexico game. Those are your 2 most veteran players in this type of matchup. You need those guys to have good games. Yeah, it'd be great to see some of the youngsters who have really progressed since this matchup with New Mexico, like Cayenne. He had a couple of threes against New Mexico, but he's playing a lot better ball right now than he was playing in December. We've seen Jalen Crocker-Johnson look a lot more like what we envision now that he's at the 4 and they got Bemba at the 5. This isn't the same team that played New Mexico, before Christmas, but it's not that complicated of a matchup. Like, one team wants to run, One team wants to slow it down. The Rams aren't as flashy. We talked about that a little bit the other day. It's more methodical. If you can do that, you're going to have an opportunity. But I think if you're turning the ball over, if you're missing open shots, you're giving them transition looks. It's going to get ugly. And then the last thing I'll just say is you got to do the little things. Hit your free throws. You've been the best free throw shooting team in the country. Geoff brought up the fact that teams have not been hitting their free throws against the Lobos. That hasn't been an issue for CSU. They're 13% better than their opponents in league play to this point. But this is the type of game where, like, if you have the yips all of a sudden at the free throw line, that could really come back to haunt you. You got to secure the loose balls. You got to do the little things, hit your layups. You don't have very much margin for error in this matchup. You're going to be significant underdogs. I haven't seen a line yet. Wouldn't surprise me if it's like 7 or 8, maybe even close to double digits there, just in the pit especially. But this is a big opportunity for CSU. And if you win this, all of a sudden your chance to not only get at least a share of the title, but potentially even win it outright are going to go up drastically. You've still got massive games coming up. It doesn't get any easier. You get San Diego State, Utah State, and Wyoming after it. This 4-game stretch will ultimately dictate whether you are a contender or whether you are a pretender. In my estimation, pretender may be a little bit harsh. Nobody even expected CSU to be in this spot in the first place. You want to more than anything like finish top 5, get the bye in the Mountain West tournament. Even top 3 would be awesome. The higher you can finish, the more favorable draw you are likely going to get. But that's what I want to see. I want to see, can the Rams go into a hostile territory and outplay a team that probably has more talent than them on paper. But I like the experience of this Rams team. I think things are gelling on both sides of the ball. And if they play their game, I think they have an opportunity. But it really is about trying to prevent those just back-breaking runs that New Mexico seemingly gets in every single game, where you look up, it's kind of shot for shot, and all of a sudden a 15-0 run, and they're up 20. That's a tough spot in the pit to come back from. We'll see how the Rams can respond. We're going to get out of here. If you have any questions, comments, throw them my way. We've got one from Juan. Take a quick breather. Then I'll give some thoughts on altitude as well. All right. Juan earlier commented in the Toyota chat, any thoughts on the coaching matchup, Medved versus Patino? I would argue that Medved is a better coach historically, has done more with less. And Patino, to me, has always been kind of a does less with more type coach. That said, I was really impressed with, obviously them winning the Mountain West tournament last year. I thought that spoke to that team's composure, especially considering they didn't feel like they had to win it to make the NCAA tournament. That ended up being the case, obviously, in hindsight. But I think they've done a good job of building around the right guys. And that's something that I would compliment both coaches on. Patino last year, and we talked about this with Geoff a little bit, like, you're in a little bit of a weird spot where you have these key veterans and Mashburn and Jalen House, and then you clearly have a rising star and Donovan Dent, who's like, when he's on the floor, it's just different. I'm not sure that a lot of coaches would have been able to navigate those waters, probably end up losing, a rising star in Dent. So I credit Patino for that. But I think this is an important year for him because, to me, I put him in that Alford mix where it's like, man, you have all this talent and what are you doing with it? Like, that's maybe a little bit harsh because Patino's been fairly consistent, in New Mexico. But to me, I just feel like Nique, especially when you look at this CSU team, which was picked 7th, lost all its leading contributors outside of Nique and Lake. This very easily could have been a 500 season. And instead we're looking at a chance to potentially, push for a conference championship. You're 8-2. Obviously hope to see them keep up this pace. But I would argue that this has been Nique Medved's most impressive coaching job, probably since like that first or second season, which was when he was still trying to rebuild from the ashes, because this program had some success there under Miles, and then even early Larry years, like, you still had some pretty good teams, but when it fell apart quickly. And those cabinets were pretty bare when he came in. Before we get out, I did just briefly want to give a couple of thoughts on this altitude situation. If you have any questions, comments, throw them my way. Shout out to Steve Ivy, says great interview, J Mike, much love. Make sure you guys are supporting everything he's doing. Swole's college hoops coverage does a great job. Altitude and Comcast, for the first time since 2019, have come to an agreement. You can now get Altitude with the advanced sports package, which was something I used to have because it gives you CBS Sports Network and the NFL Network. I'm glad that they've finally been able to figure out something. I think the fact that you still have to pay extra to watch your own teams is ridiculous, especially because Comcast has never stopped charging a regional sports fee. They don't offer any regional sports. You don't show the Rockies and you don't offer Altitude now in your basic cable package. Where the hell is that regional sports fee going? It's only like $4 or $5, but it's just the state of trying to consume sports in 2025 has never been more annoying to me. We have more technology than ever, and there's just so many things that factor into this. I know the regional sports model is largely broken anyways. This is not an issue that was unique to Denver. We're seeing it, Comcast, and they've had issues in cities much bigger than Denver, like New York and in Texas and other places. And I understand all of that. But the fact that this took a half a decade and they missed 4 total MVPs, 3 championships. I tweeted 2, but it was 3 because the Mammoth, Avs, and Nugs all won a title during this window. It's unforgivable. It's not the fault of the talent, the producers, or anything like that. And it was pointed out to me that back, especially when all this started, there were some interactions online from Altitude talent where maybe they didn't handle it the best. I think they were a little bit snarky. They were in a rock and a hard place, though. I mean, what are you going to do? Are you going to crap on your bosses publicly? It's not a great way to stay on air, I can tell you that. I just think that all of this is just absurd, and it's crazy to me that it took this long to get it resolved. Thank God that it finally is. But the fact that you have to pay that, and it looks like it's $9 a month now, and it's going to jump to 16 in April. I think you're still better off with Fubo as a sports fan if that is the main reason that you are consuming sports. I made the switch, and I do not intend to go back, even with Altitude going back on Comcast. So that's all I have to say. Shout out to everybody that tuned in. I know we don't normally have shows on Tuesday. I appreciate Riley behind the sticks, my producer, making this happen last minute. I couldn't do this without the team behind me at DNVR. I couldn't do this without all you guys supporting the content. Big thanks to Geoff Grammer. I thought it was an awesome conversation, really enjoyable. Just think he brings such great insight. And much like me, he genuinely loves Mountain West hoops. And I think that's what the fans, more than anything, I think that's what they want, is people that appreciate what they're covering. There's a lot of folks in media that get jaded, that don't appreciate the moment. They don't understand how freaking lucky they are. Jeff and I think when we're sitting in Vegas in the Thomas and Mack Center watching the Mountain West tournament, we got a twinkle in our eye because we romanticize this stuff. We love college hoops. We love the tradition. And again, I just keep coming back to, as excited as I am for CSU and the Pac-12, wholeheartedly feel like it's the right move for CSU. Not having New Mexico in the pit be a part of that is going to be very weird for me after close to 2 decades of watching these matchups very intently. That's all I've got for you guys this afternoon. Shout out to everybody in Ram Nation. Much love, y'all. We are always proud to be. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.